This video isn't so much about the man and his donkey, but an example of how the subject of history that is being taught in our classrooms is being distorted to further a political narrative, and it's being done right before our eyes. This is a first in a series of putting a magnifying glass on the subject of history, so welcome to Twisted History. The story of Simpson and his donkey, who fought during World War I, is still legendary in Australia. However, particularly in the last few years, it has begun to be questioned by more and more, and this is emblematic of the rejection of traditional views of history, which are being replaced by something much different. The more traditional view of his life goes as such. John Simpson Kirkpatrick was born in 1892 in England, of Scottish descent. He joined the British Merchant Marine before moving to Australia in 1910 and enlisted in the Australian Imperial Forces in the Medical Corps at the commencement of the war. He landed at Anzac Cove on the 25th of April 1915 at the infamous Gallipoli, yet despite being under constant fire from the Turkish machine guns the whole time, Simpson, with the aid of 5 local donkeys he requisitioned, managed to bring out countless wounded, but tragically met his end 24 days into the campaign. His name soon became legend at home as part of a large propaganda effort for the war, where it started to border on mythology, getting accredited for rescuing more than would have been humanly possible, being mistaken for other medics, yet at the same time having some of the more unsavoury points left out, such as in 1909 Simpson may have deliberately joined the Merchant Navy with the intention all along of jumping ship to avoid the impending European war, or using a false surname to avoid detection. However, along came the far leftists, who took over the humanities across the Western world and said, well, there are holes in this story. For one, he seems to have deserted, so in one foul swoop they have exposed the narrative, and therefore they extrapolate that the whole story must be questionable and likely just propaganda. So they just threw the baby out with the bathwater so that they could remake history the way they believe it should be done, only to find that their way doesn't tell us much at all. Worse, it's a sleight of hand, for what they are saying is, if some of it is in doubt, then it all is, which is a dreadful mistake. Or even better as they see it, they can still teach the story of Simpson and his donkey, not only exalting him as a deserter, but primarily focusing on making it an example of how traditional views of history can't be trusted. For according to them, it is better than to focus only on what we can know, without doubt, even if that means history can no longer tell us much at all about anything. But that isn't the whole story. There are further points now getting overlooked. Firstly, even if it was just a fabricated story, if enough people believe it, then it takes on a life of its own regardless, making it, in a sense, true. Most importantly though, doesn't it make Simpson's story even more impressive that, despite trying to avoid war like any sane person would, when push come to shove, he voluntarily walked into a hail of machine gun fire to rescue anyone he could, friend and foe alike, and he died saving men he never knew? It actually makes his story more relatable. For even though we all may have fear in our heart, we can also be at the same time a hero. There is value in the traditional view of history, as we can learn a lot, particularly about ourselves, although the traditional version is being deliberately done away with, likely because those traits are antithetical to the revolution. The left believe that the whole structure of society is rotten to the core and needs to be torn down, and as with other red revolutions, they go after history first. That is why history matters.